that's my life from 7th grade to graduating high school.
Really?
Yeah, like
Give me some. Give me one.
But so
Oh,
this is I want to hear some of your stories because the reason I want to hear some of these stories is because that's where I think a lot of racism happens. You know, I don't think it happens so much. Obviously, it happens in the cities, but like you look at Baltimore, it's like what 60 some percent black.
right.
You know what I mean?
And then all right. Well, I'm happy you said that, right? So if we go back to when I like lived in Baltimore City, right? So if you want to know, if you want to know, like the insight of a kid, like just a black kid who grew up, you know what I mean, who
Predominantly black area.
right, predominantly black area, and then was transferred into a whitish. So I got to
That's what
see
happened.
both, you know what I mean, both ends of the spectrum.
right.
So when I was in
Well, all
Baltimore
right,
City,
give us culture shock. What was
Right.
the difference?
so Baltimore City, I see police, you know what I mean, to me that ain't. I don't care.
Didn't
like
bo- it didn't
flat
bother
out,
you?
that's just a cop. You know what I'm saying? It was never like a I feel in fear of my life type deal, right? It was never I feel I'm gonna be singled out because I'm black walking down the street.
So you weren't afraid of cops in
No,
Baltimore?
no. And now to say that I was young and I mean I didn't have anything to do with
Yeah,
police
like you knew
officers.
you didn't do anything
Right.
wrong.
But
yeah.
even still, I see family members. I see older, you know what I mean, cousins of mine. They're being,
Wow.
you know what I mean, not necessarily harassed, but at the end of the day, you know that they're doing something.
I have a question about that. Were the cops predominantly white, black, mixed?
In Baltimore, I ran into more black officers than I ran into white police officers. And that, when I say ran into, as a kid, I just mean like that I observed in the neighborhood. You know what I mean? And
Right.
honestly, to tell you the truth,
But I'm gonna tell you right there, that is a little different because of Baltimore and its heavy black population. Like me being
Exactly.
from somewhere, I lived in a predominantly black area, especially with.
But it was
Mexicans.
probably
That
policed by
wasn't-
white
But
people.
most of the cops I saw were white.
right? And-
But that's because I'm not from an area. Like even though that area might have been heavily populated with black people and even Hispanic people, because I was in Texas, we still saw predominantly white cops.
White cops.
Right.
I was like, his is because they have a lot. That's like that area.
It's
is
Baltimore.
100%
First of all,
exactly.
there's a negative connotation when it comes to Baltimore
Man, there
and
is.
Baltimore Police Department in
And
general.
The wire
Like,
did not help.
Right. So if you think of and it wasn't like it was a new revelation in Baltimore. The Wire coming on TV, we already had corrupt politicians going to prison. You to this day, you know what I'm saying? They're every day
new
it's a
mayor.
new exactly pulled over. Don't turn off the camera. You know what I'm saying? It's you have to be corrupt in Baltimore City to get elected because the people who are calling you to power are corrupt as well, and you have to be with like-minded people. So like. I can't hire a square if I know I'm doing something illegal.
Right.
Like they're gonna snitch on me. I have to hire someone who is willing to bend the rules, who's willing to look the other way, who's willing to maybe partake in some of these things that I'm doing. And that's where like black people don't like to agree with Donald Trump on anything or like they want to refute everything that this man says. One thing he did say that was the truth was Baltimore City is a cesspool, a swamp.
Don't forget
That
about
needs
Detroit.
th-
Not Detroit. Was it Chicago?
Chicago. So, I mean, same difference, and it's not necessarily because
Did
of
you say
black or white. It's because you have a group of people that are in charge that are hungry for whatever their personal motivation. They're not putting the people first at the end of the day. Whatever the case whatever they do, whether it's embezzling, whether it's you know what I mean cheating on elections or they are putting themselves above the people in an elected position. So
I feel that's politicians in general, but
Right.
That's
And so
politics.
the issue
Right.
with Baltimore City is you don't just have a corrupt populace, meaning the people of the city are corrupt. You have a corrupt controlling factor. You have a corrupt system in place. Like the United States system of governance is backwards in its entirety. I think, in my personal opinion, from the get go. When you add what the situation in Baltimore City to an already backwards system, it literally just creates chaos.
So I want to roll on that though because like I've done a lot of research on that and like just some of the factors I saw. Like I said like I know it's like 60-some% of Baltimore's black. I mean it was a black the Freddie Gray, right? Freddie Gray situation. It was like the number one cop, like lead I don't know chief of police or whatever was black.
people
Right.
involved.
Number 2 was black. The
Wasn't
mayor
chief
was
of
black.
police?
Right.
The
Chief
head
of police,
judge?
right?
Yeah, chief of police
Yeah.
black. The head judge was black.
But I don't think people put a
You knew,
racist
like, the
conno-
judge-
Well, the judge is a family friend. Actually.
judge is family friend. And just basically
it's-
said like, what do you say? I'm gonna let you tell.
Well, no, I
what the
mean,
judge said.
and this is coming from what I'm saying family. He was like, look, he was like the type of judge is. He was like, if you have the evidence and you can prove it, fine. If you can't, he's like, I'm not going to do this because he's black, I'm black, and everybody's emotions are high. He's like, if it's nothing there, there's nothing there. And the problem was they didn't really have anything. And so when basically it was like, well, you're acquitted, you're acquitted, you're acquitted. Everybody's pissed off and sending them death threats. But he was like, hey, don't get mad at me. Give me evidence. Don't give me emotion.
Yes.
And the lady, who was the lady who was doing it?
What's her name? Mosby?
Mos,
Marilyn
yeah,
Marilyn
some Mosby, something like that. She was like, she didn't have much.
the state's
What she
attorney.
was doing was she went out there and told
Mosby was the state attorney.
Yeah,
I believe so.
Marilyn Mosby is the state's attorney.
I
for
think she
Baltimore
got.
City.
I think she's not doing so hot as
No,
now,
she's
right?
not. Well, that's because of the crime rate, right?
Yeah, but it was a situation where she went out there and she was appeasing to the people, but she wasn't telling the truth. Like, hey, we don't really have a lot to go on. Instead, she was like, we're gonna do this. We're gonna get people in jail, blah blah. And it's
But
like,
that's because you have to look at the climate, right? You
I
know,
mean,
you have
the
a
climate.
socioeconomic climate in America that is against the police, and that's not it's not unwarranted. You get what I'm saying?
yeah.
The people don't trust the police for a reason. It's
Well,
not.
see, but and we talk about this too. The reason I tell, because I tell people like my dad and everything. Like my dad is born in the '60s. He was a segregated area, whatever. But in their area, they didn't fear the black cops. They feared the white cops. They feared the cops who were coming,
Right.
who they knew didn't live there. And that's the issue. It's like when you get a bunch of people, and it's kind of like teachers. I don't know if you know teachers or anything like that. Like when the teachers first coming out of school, they send them to the worst schools, and then they work their way up to the good schools.
Right.
But that doesn't make sense because
It's backwards.
And usually, what happens is and it's funny because you'll see a little white lady, little young white lady, bright eyed, and she's sent to the shittiest, most fucking ghettos at least here in Baltimore. That's what I've seen happen personally.
And it kills their
And
want
then
to
it kills
need to teach.
their emotion. It kills everything they want to do about teaching kids because these kids need more than what they're having there, and then the teacher doesn't have enough, the school doesn't have enough, there's not enough funding, blah blah blah. Like one of the schools I was telling about got shut down while the teacher was teaching, and she was like, "What the fuck?" She was like, "These kids." I remember she was like, "These kids have no fucking chance. It's almost impossible." She's like, they don't give a shit about them when they come there. They don't help them while they're there. They're cutting funding and they're shutting the school down, and they're going to force this group of kids into another school that's already overcrowded.
And half of them don't appropriate to the other schools. So you have
Exactly. Yeah, you got to think about how hard it is just to go from job to job or anything like that, school to school. It's like for a kid in the formative years trying to do that.
Something that Ben Carson's pushing for
What
is
is it?
like
Oh, Lord.
I can't remember the term, but it was basically
Is this for Baltimore? The specific plan is for Baltimore.
no,
Oh.
just for
in general.
basically
Well, you
urban.
can't have a
He
general
has been
plan.
quiet as shit. I'll tell
Well, you
that.
know why? Because he got attacked by his constituents for having the dumbest political views I've ever heard in my life. For a neurosurgeon, he definitely
Book sense, not common
definitely
sense.
did not.
It depends what you're talking about. I mean, I understand. Like, I listened
He
to a
likes
whole
it.
debate panel of like Maxine Walters just like going after him, and
What do you do though? Like for instance, Baltimore City, from a standpoint, like I grew up in the city, left the city, and came back, right? And to tell you that I've done like for instance, lead in Baltimore City, you cannot do anything with the children of Baltimore City until you fix the lead problem. Have you ever
You mean
heard
physical lead poison type shit?
lead in
Like
the water?
from-
Right.
oh, in the
Have you ever
water.
heard of is it the white L and the black butterfly in Baltimore City? Like that's how they divide it up, right?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly. So if you want to look into
Yeah, I
that,
don't
it's the white L and the black butterfly, or it might be
You're
the
saying
black
white
butterfly.
owl and black
L.
butterfly.
L. It's how they divide up the city. So,
To white L.
white
the
L,
white
the letter L,
Yeah.
and the black butterfly.
Yep.
Explain this to me. I need to.
Educate us.
Yeah, go ahead and keep talking. We're looking.
So
yeah.
what it is
You don't have to stop.
in Baltimore City, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's two parts of Baltimore City. You can see how it's developed. You can see it's literally like you can
shit.
draw lines. Yeah. So, and you can. They did a study, right? So this is what I'm talking about, Steve.
Yeah, I just pulled it up too. What the fuck is this?
This is the white L, right? That's
All right,
where
I'm gonna get a snip shot and throw that into our little
okay.
line here so people can see it. But
Right,
bring
so-
it back up and talk about it.
So the
I
white
can
L is
see it.
where the majority of white people live
Is
in
it an
Baltimore
L?
City, right? And it's literally an L, right?
Right.
Now, what they did in 2018 was they did a study on lead poisoning, and then they did a map. The map for lead poisoning and the cases literally are indicative of this L. They outline this L, right? So where you see the majority of the white population there, they are not affected by lead poisoning. Their water is clean and their pipes are good. And then if you look at the black areas, they are all, like not some, all of them are infected with lead poisoning. And then they even took it a step further. They went and correlated that with crime. And then they took the age group of the kids who were most affected by the lead poisoning. And then they aged them to this year. And they said these are the kids that are 21, 20, 19. And these are the kids that are committing all these violent crimes. And what what they have seen is that the lead literally is causing these kids to not only do you not have direction just from your neighborhood or your family or
Right,
anything like that.
development issues,
Now
too.
you have development issues mentally. You don't know right from wrong. You're not being taught right from wrong, and now you have the inability to understand right from wrong. So when you are taught and you're already affected by lead poisoning, and then everyone in your neighborhood is sick and promoting murder, you now have a lifestyle of murder that's perpetuating, and the system is going to crash. There's nothing you can do about that unless you fix the water. You can't. There's so much data on what the lead has done to Baltimore City, and if you look at other cities, Detroit, Chicago, it's the same problem: dirty water, right? And you can attribute that to mental
Don't
health,
forget about Flint.
right? Flint,
Yeah,
Michigan,
I seen
and
that.
the crime rate shot through the roof, and it's not one factor, but
So Flint, Michigan was also a lead.
yeah, lead.
Well,
Yeah.
also it was like a lot. Well, Detroit, Michigan, but a lot of places like Flint was doing bad crime wise as well. But then that happened, and the funny thing about it, people just totally forgot about it because it's like that was back in what 2014,
Right,
15.
and they got
And they
some
never
of the
got
money. No, they got some money. To,
I mean,
to
no, but
rebuild,
what I'm
but
saying,
they didn't get
it-
anything really.
They you still have people with the same problem they had back 4 or 5 years ago, and it's like, hey, don't forget about us, and be like, nah, we're on
Listen,
something else. News cycles not on you
Lead
guys
babies
anymore.
got the short end of the stick, right? So when I say lead babies, I mean the babies of Baltimore City whom, and not nearly enough of them, only a small fraction of the people who were actually infected with lead got to sue and get money from their lead cases. But what they did was they got their money and were never educated on how to spend said money, right? So for instance, I have two little cousins. They got $1 million each. $1 million each from lead poisoning.
Really?
Case, right?
Are you for real?
Yeah, they got $1 million each. Tell me what they did with that $1 million. One of them started a wannabe rap career, and then the
How old were they when they got the money? Or is this like family?
I would say that they were 16, 17 when they got when it first started.
So
when
the
they actually
parents got
got
the
the
money
money,
then.
it was like 18, 20. But no, they got their money.
Oh,
They got their money.
they got approved and then didn't actually physically get the money.
Exactly. They didn't
Okay.
get the money and like they didn't pay it out until, you know what I mean, they were
Until they were
adults.
adults.
Exactly. And they spent their money and they spent it in the most ruthless and dumb ways, right? But what the city should have done, what some council, some governing board should have done was say, hey, all this money from lead that we are giving to these individuals, we should pool this and fix the infrastructure in the city. We should fix the
That's too-
problem
that's too
as
much like
opposed to having all these reoccurring cases. You're going to keep having generation after generation suing the city and suing all these entities for having, you know what I mean, lead. And then what? Right? So the Orioles can stay in business without winning seasons? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, it's a perpetual system. And then the fact that the studies are there and the information is there and they're still not doing anything about it is a problem. I mean, we get federal dollars in Baltimore City. We get a lot of federal money, but you can't tell. You can't tell the crime rate every year. They like to attribute the crime rate in
look at the
2015
areas.
to the riots, right? But what's the excuse this year when we exceeded the 2015 murder rate and crime rate? So there was no riots this year. There was no
nothing.
Freddie Gray this year. So I don't believe that the spike in crime that year was due to Freddie Gray. I think that's business as usual in
no.
Baltimore.
When I first got here, and I tell everybody the story back at the end of 2006, like actually like September of 06. I won't say you guys, but Baltimore was at like 180 murders, right? And by I want to say November,
Uh-huh.
or maybe before, probably September, October, November. By November, it was at 400 murders, and I was like, "What in the fuck are you guys doing?" Because I was new, so I was watching the news and trying to figure out, what was going on. Plus, I didn't know a lot of people, so I was stuck in the house, and I was like, "Are you kidding?" Because it went from literally like 180 something when I got here, and that was September like 16th, right? By November, it was at 408, and I was like, I said, "Were you playing catch up or something? Was somebody sick? Like, what the fuck happened?"
A lot of the times they're gerrymandering, like not gerrymandering. They're finessing the numbers in Baltimore City to tell you the truth. Like you saw it on The Wire. Like that's a perfect example of a way that they would do it. I don't know if it was exactly done in that way, but where they would say, "We're not going to investigate this because we don't want to discover more murders. We don't
Yeah.
want our numbers to go up." So that's the reason why there was a 21-year-old kid in Baltimore City that was responsible for 22 murders. Like he wasn't. You know what I'm saying? Like how do you have more murders than you have years on this earth? Like how is that a
And on top of that, how are you not caught? 'Cause
yeah,
it's like,
exactly,
it's-
right? Listen, Last week.
That's a serial killer.
Last week, I walk out of my apartment. I live in Catonsville, so now I live 2 minutes outside of the city. Like literally, I could walk. It's a 5-minute walk into the city, 2-minute drive. Someone got killed right out front of my house.
Really?
Flat out, right? Like walk out down the steps, 15, maybe 20 feet to the right. There was a dead body. Police came, investigated everything like that. And I'm thinking like, okay, well, you know what I mean? They probably should attribute this murder to Baltimore City because, I mean, technically we live in Baltimore County, but
Yeah.
if you see where I live at, it's
no,
it's
they're
hood
not.
adjacent. Like
They're not gonna do
Oh,
that.
Right,
yeah, I know
right.
Catonsville.
right. So like honestly, you don't know like people outside looking in, you might want to say like, oh, pray for Baltimore City. Like it somehow you might want to blame the police. You might want to just blame the administrations, you do the government.
Man, it's
But honestly,
everybody.
it's everyone plays their part, but the largest part is the citizens of the citizens of Baltimore City are denied the access to a proper life, just in general. Like there's kids that come up on I shit you not on my bus route.
Mhm.
I don't take the bus, but like the bus route near my house.
Mhm.
There's a 7-Eleven, and then you go up the road some more. There's another 7-Eleven, and then there's a Walgreens, and like a couple little shops or whatever on Frederick Road.
Is
The
that
kid-
that 4-way?
It's like if we're going up Frederick Road right before you hit 695. So if you're coming from the city,
Oh, I know exactly.
yeah. So that bus route there, they have that big bus stop that with the loop.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's where they start. So the kids come in from the city, and they literally in like flash mobs run into the 7-Eleven. They steal as much shit as they can. They put in their book bags and they run out. They get back. They hop on the bus before it pulls off, and then they go do it at the next stop. They go up to the Walgreens. They do it to the 7-Eleven up the street, and then they come back down the street and do the same thing, and then they go into the city. I've watched this happen twice. And then finally, the 7-Eleven manager's like, all right, I'm calling the police. But he didn't want to press charges. So he was an older black man. He was like, I don't want to get these kids in trouble. You know what I mean? I know that they're just misguided. And I had a conversation with this man in the 7-Eleven. I'm like, yeah, they're misguided. But, I mean, you're not doing them any justice by not getting them in trouble. I'm not an advocate for snitching or anything like that. But at the end of the day.
Well, here's the thing. That's not snitching.
Right. That's what
different.
I was about to say.
I say
Like,
snitching is, like I said, all three of us do a crime.
and
They
then-
catch me, and then I tell on
Exactly.
you. That's snitching. Me being a regular civilian right now, you do something to me. Fuck.
That's why we
not
pay
snitching.
taxes, right? You know what I'm
that's you
saying?
calling
Like, that's
cops.
why we have.
Snitches, like snitches get stitches only applies to criminals on criminal.
But
like,
then when that happens, right, when you have that trust, like when you believe, like, oh, I can call the police and they're going to help
oh
me.
no, they're not gonna
Right.
do- Yeah, that's the other part. They're
That's
not gonna
another
do
thing,
shit.
right? To me, I firmly believe that the police are not a preventative measure. The police are after the fact measures.
That's
so
exactly what they
for
do.
me,
100%.
why? Yeah. So why is it always like when you see these police brutality videos? It's like, why are you the aggressor in this situation when really your job is after a crime has been committed? So a detective job is to investigate and do, you know what I mean? Your job is to come lock down the scene. You don't ever see detectives beating the crap out of people. You don't ever
Well, it
see.
depends.
I mean, technically,
Most of the time
in
you don't.
comparison to
It's
the
usually the
beat
beat
cops
cop,
that
yeah.
you know what I mean, you
Yeah.
don't see detectives wailing on people. You don't see because they're held to a higher standard. You know what I'm saying?
Supposed to be,
They
yeah.
have more to lose.
They whoop your ass in interrogation room.
Right. Well, if that's the case, right? At least they did it out of the public eye,
Yeah.
and therefore the public doesn't lose trust for your institution. Beat cops, on the other hand, you're gonna do your dirt. You have to do it in private. I'm not one that say like I'm completely against police brutality, but there's a difference between being blatantly just like I don't care, like I'm gonna do whatever I want and run amok, versus I'm going to do this, but not in the public eye.
I've known people who've got
Right.
snatched up by certain cops that everybody knew was kind of dirty,
Mhm.
and they're like shake the pocket, shake them for whatever they got on their pockets,
Mhm.
maybe rough them up a little, and toss them right back onto the same block, and maybe
Exactly.
do that shit next month.
You know,
It's like,
You know
now,
why?
do those cops
Because-
stay on forever? Maybe not. But there's some cops I've seen who used to do that shit who were on the force for like 20, 30 years before they quit.
Right.
right?
So it's just one of those situations where it's like, what he's talking about, it's like you are just destroying, and we talked about this, like you're destroying the public image. Because if only time I see you is when something bad happens.
Same thing happened to black people. Then you cry
Exactly.
about like what happened, right? It's like only time you see police is in a negative connotation on the news or whatever the fuck. And I'm like, only time you see black people.
It's in a negative connotation.
On the
And
news
yeah,
or
he's
whatever.
talking about
But
that
that's
too.
what I, that's
But
what,
that's-
I, that's what I
but
talk about.
And I was like, yeah, because the police, it's like, hey guys, if you can get all this money for militarizing your whole unit and your little fucking how, like you got people who got tanks and
Tawnytown has a
and-
tank.
Why?
Population 5,000, and they have more police than Westminster and like all the surrounding.
That's what
areas.
I'm saying. Like shit like
well, a
that.
lot of drugs coming through Baltimore.
But I mean,
But not to Tawnytown.
Yeah,
You
but-
have Westminster.
They go straight through
No,
Torrington.
no,
into
he's
Hanover.
talking about being in
but
the
they
area.
got to go through Westminster first.
Oh, true.
Like that's the
Look,
larger city.
And trust me, they on the goddamn.
We used to
you
call
know,
that Heroin Highway.
Right.
But you know those
140,
state
yeah.
those state troopers, they are fucking on it. Oh god.
Well, state troopers, and that's another thing I have. Like, you can have a policy, right? And you can hide behind policy all you want. But if the policy is racist, then it's racist. If you tell your group of cops to target a specific demographic of people, and that specific description happens to be that of a specific race, then that means you are being racist. It doesn't matter if your policy or the numbers show that black people are going to more likely have
listen,
drugs or black people are going to more likely have weapons. Therefore, we should pull black people over at a higher rate.
But that's
than-
like stopping frisk in New York. They
Exactly,
actually
and
only
it failed.
turned up. I mean, out of all the people, because they were
Black
literally
and
doing
brown
the same
people.
thing. Like it was only. I forgot how many people, but it's like they said they did it to 1 million people or
Yeah,
something like that.
and it was like
but it was
90
literally, but it was like it was black and brown like 2 and 3 times.
Right.
Like the same people again and again. But the problem was they only turned up maybe
And what was this called?
stop and frisk in New
Stop
York.
and
In New
frisk.
York. I mean, it's
They have it other places
have it
where the
other places,
policies aren't
but-
implemented in a racist way. You know what I'm
but
saying?
New York was literally like, this is what we're doing. This is to get the guns off the street, and it only turned
But
up
do you
like
know what it did?
3. I don't even think it turned up 5% of guns.
Do you know what Stop and Frisk did to Brooklyn?
What? Gentrify the shit out?
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? I catch you with
Gentrified.
drugs, you got to stay off my block.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If I catch you with, you can't come on this place. It's the same thing they did in Compton. You know what I'm saying? Rodeo Drive. You can't cross the street or you're going to jail. Like, if you look a certain way and
Yeah,
you come
jaywalking's
into
real
our
big in
neighborhood,
California,
right? It's
yeah.
like we will use anything and anything necessary. It's just like, for instance, when black people first got their freedom, right? And you got the right to vote. What was the catch to black people when you first got the right
You
to
had
vote?
to have your ID.
And what do you have to do to vote? You have to know how to what?
Read.
Read.
What was illegal for black people to do?
Read.
So if you went to vote, what happened to you?
Was that, well, not at that time. If
You were getting locked up. Like,
well, that's also like a loitering. That became a huge thing after slaves became free, because what would happen is you would have a bunch of freed slaves who, I mean, now they're out of a job. I mean, and it sounds fucked up, but they're out of a job, they're out of a home, blah, blah. No matter how fucked up it was, they actually had somewhere to stay, eat, whatever. They knew what was going to happen. Now, once you put them on the street, now they have to figure it out. But so it would be maybe a group of black people or something like that. And what they would do is they were like, oh, you guys are loitering. So
The
now
fundamental issue
well,
there.
but here they swoop them up, and then
You're
the
back.
judge, they take him to court. The judge gives him prison time,
and you're back
and
into
he'll be
slavery.
working, but he'll be working with a plantation owner. So he
His
was like,
original
"You're gonna-"
plantation
Yeah,
owner.
he was like, you're going to finish out your sentence at this plantation. So now you're right back into slavery.
Exactly.
Like,
And
literally.
then that became modern day slavery. So you got to understand how that progressed,
Well, that's
right?
like the 13th Amendment.
Yeah,
where it's
you-
actually you're in court, you're enslaved.
You're back into slavery. If you're incarcerated, you're considered less than a normal citizen, i.e., a convict, a slave.
Well, that's why they're talking about a lot of this stuff with prison reform stuff, and the reason it's so gangbusters with
Well, did you see you're
black labor stuff.
You're from here. You guys just had a judge that went to prison for they gave him what 30, 60 years or something.
Is,
for
it the, is that was
he
that
was selling
Pennsylvania?
kids to prisons. Yeah,
because
Yeah, it
it was
was-
but to a private
it was
business, right?
Harrisburg or whatever whatever.
What's that? Because I remember this.
You
Cause
remember
it's-
the guy's name?
I can tell you right now.
but I think I think I know what you're talking about, because we're talking years.
Yep.
And we're talking.
It was like
probably hundreds
4,000
or thousands
kids
of
or something.
Yeah, thousands of kids.
Selling them to prison?
Yeah.
Well,
He was
not-
taking
not
bribes to
prisoners, but
fill up
yeah.
the quota. So like you could go to jail for the most minuscule thing. You could have like a
He-
dime
this-
sack
and
of
mind
weed.
you,
You're
this
getting
is
5
juvenile.
years.
These
Yeah.
are juvenile kids. We're not talking about adults. We're talking about
Well,
juveniles.
see, dude, this is part of my problem with this stuff is the corporatism behind some of these
Oh,
prisons.
man.
Well,
And
first of all, we
market
know.
shareholders make money off of the
Yep.
amount of people in prisons.
But what does
That
prison do?
Should be so illegal.
Nope.
It does
Anyone
nothing.
know?
Nothing.
Right. So they did a study, and this is back when they were doing the behavioralist study. So this is back when you're talking like Pavlov and Maslow, like from psychology, like
Mm-hmm.
when they were doing like testing like dog whatever.
Salivin.
Salivin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Slow, you made me.
Right. And they knew then that prison didn't work. I think was it Pavlov who did the prison study where he put the college kids into the
Oh,
prison.
yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
There's
Right,
a documentary on it.
They also
Right,
go
and they
crazy.
realized that
called,
prisons don't work.
Fuck. I know
It's
what you're
called
talking
the.
about.
I watched it. It's called the.
I can't remember.
I know what you're talking about.
Like
They
the
made a
Harvard
couple-
study
they
or
made-
something? It
Yeah, they
was
made
like-
2 movies. Well,
Yeah,
a
yeah.
documentary and a movie about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they proved that
It doesn't work.
it doesn't work, and
because it's not set up to work.
It's not, and it
Well,
doesn't do
actually,
anything. It doesn't
used to-
rehabilitate
it
anyone.
used to- the funny thing about it is, it actually before they started privatizing a lot of prisons, like 80s, 90s, because they started doing that more in like the late 90s, 2000s with the private prisons. It used to help because you used to be able to go to prison and you can get multiple college.
Well, you
multiple
thought that it
college
helped, but they didn't
degrees.
have the data to support that it was actually helping you. You
Well, no,
had
I'm
what,
not. I'm not saying. I'm
yeah.
saying. I'm put it this way that we're talking about from like this much to nothing. Because I mean, I've met people who got the degree in college who was able to get the like a bunch of stuff, and I mean not in college, get their college degree in prison and all these things. Like they're taking away libraries, they're taking away all these things that could actually keep some of these people
Actually,
to help them so when they
Reform.
get out.
because prison isn't for
No, it's
reform. It's for you to come
Especially not the
back.
private
Like they like when the
well,
when-
and that's why because shareholders.
right.
That should be illegal.
Well, first of all, jails. I don't believe that you should go to prison unless you commit murder, rape, or some egregious crime. Like normal stuff, like possession of a drug, for instance. Why are you going to prison for that? If you think that prison is going to stop someone from using drugs when there's more drugs in prison than there are on the
I
streets,
got a perfect example. My uncle, and I won't say his name. My uncle, from the time I can remember him being in prison.
This is cricket right here.
It's stupid.
oh, that's called the Stanford prison
Yeah,
experience.
yeah. Well, I say, but my uncle, from the time I was probably like, I'll say 6, maybe 7 years old, was in prison. Right, that was probably his early 20s. He was a junkie. So what happened was he was a junkie. That's the guy. Yep.
Keep
That's
going.
right. But he was a junkie, and he was hooked on drugs. Right, so he went to prison. He went to prison for some botch fucking store crime, whatever. Right. I sent to prison, and in prison he just kept getting high. There was like they were supposed to help him out with like they're supposed to do some type of
Right, rehabilitation.
well, like actually rehab, right?
Right.
So and then he would get out on parole, and parole, man, that's why I was telling you, parole is probably one of the biggest jokes in the world too.
Right.
That just encourages
Good Meek
recidivism.
Mill.
Well, I mean, but not even him. But I'm telling you personally, so my uncle would do that. He would get out of prison. He wouldn't have. I mean, but he was still getting high in prison. He would get high outside, test dirty, get scooped up again. I mean, he spent most of his adult life. I'm talking 25 plus years in prison, all because he was hooked on drugs. A lot of his crimes weren't even like his first crime got him in there, which was like I said, a botch robbery, something stupid, probably high.
Mhm.
Then it was just failing probation, boom.
Right,
That's
and it's probably just drug protection.
because he's still
Scranton, PA.
he's still an addict, and finally he got out of jail. But by the time he had contracted from like sharing needles in jail, he had contracted AIDS. And
Wow.
he ended up and we're talking not too long ago, some years ago, he passed away. But he had only been out of prison probably maybe a few years. Maybe I'll say 5 at the most years he had been out of prison before, like, you know what I'm saying, he started getting the effects of that. But he
Thank you.
spent most of his, I'm talking about 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s prison.
Right.
Like the end of his 20s, I think the mid to end of his 20s, and then the rest, because he only made it to about
Over drugs,
60,
right?
like 60 something.
Can we visit like the history of drugs and like what happened there? Like, for instance, crack cocaine. Crack cocaine was something that was introduced to the black community
What is
on
hilarious? It's cocaine in rock
purpose.
form, and they give you more time for it.
right, and why? Because it's highly addictive, and guess who's using it? Black people are using it.
Well,
'Cause
Well,
they-
it's a minority
cheaper.
drug.
And,
It's
well, guess
cheaper.
what?
It's
Well,
cheaper. Cocaine,
what
you
do
had
we
to have
do?
money for
We
cocaine.
raised the price of. So if I'm the distributor, right? So if I'm Nike, let's say, and I want to only distribute a product to a certain group of people, right? But at first, I was just distributing it to everyone on a level playing field, same price, right? Well, now I want to introduce an exclusive product so that I can have 2 different buyers markets, right? In the case of the United States government, we need laborers, we need free labor for this economy, i.e., we need people who to be incarcerated. That's Ronald Reagan, right? So then
The war on drugs, baby.
then what do you do? So okay, we have a drug. So you mean to tell me that a minority, I don't even want to say black, meaning a minority, came up with cooking crack cocaine from
Well, how about
soft.
getting cocaine into
I-
America?
we'll touch that, but right, you mean to tell me that someone figured this out and decided to solicit this only to their community? This
and
is
figured out at home.
right. It's just a far-fetched idea, right? And then you take it back to if I'm Nike and I have 2 different products. So what I do is I create a premium line, right? It's the same fucking shit, right? But I put a new name, not necessarily a new name on it. I just rebranded
It's
as
like Nike and Jordan.
rich and kids. You know what I mean? Exactly like I created a subculture, and then the shit, the regular whatever you did, mom and dad shoes. Okay, I'm gonna sell that to everyone
That's
at a
still what we
lower
sold.
cost.
Nike
Exactly.
Classic.
Right,
Exactly.
and then what happens? Like you get the people who can afford the cheap stuff using the cheap stuff. Now with the caveat here in this case is that the cheap stuff was more addictive.
and got more time.
Exactly.
Which
You know what I mean?
heavily
Well, that comes
penalized.
later. You introduce laws after after your plan has worked. After you see that black people are consuming this and
Well,
they're
that's
eating
like,
this
but
up.
that's Contra. That's what's the
Contra.
whole thing about Contra
Yeah.
with Oliver
Exactly.
North, who is still fucking free after admitting he was in the wrong.
What can he do? The,
Oliver
the
North?
statute of
Yeah, Oliver North.
statute of limitations is up, buddy.
No, he not even then. When they took him to court, it wasn't up. They
I'm
just
saying
went-
now. What
Oh
are they
yeah,
gonna do
I
now?
mean now. Well, not it doesn't have to be. I mean he did help
Can I have
in
some more
bring
Cubes?
fucking drugs and into America. Fuck the goddamn black community. America. Wait, what'd you ask me for?
Ice cubes.
Oh,
Please.
I can't do it. It'll be racist if I do
Ah, I don't care, man.
it. I mean on camera.
I'm not a germaphobe like you.
No, you didn't hear what I said, did you? I said it'll be racist if I do it for you.
Why would it be racist?
Because he's getting it for you like he's just.
Come on now, Steve. You're killing the joke, baby. You're killing the
I'm
joke.
sorry. I'm sorry. Went over my head because
Yeah,
I'm not racist.
But
Back
no,
at you.
that's
Bam.
like- all right, hold on. We got reel this in. We got reel this in because it was stuff we wanted to talk about. And
Yeah, we were going.
we-
on.
we- we were
hey,
getting
it
off.
was a beautiful tangent, though. I mean,
Right.
I loved it. I loved it. We were playing volleyball
But
there.
I was like, this all came from talking about his experiences and things.